Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Electrification Academy. The Academy is a series of webinars on how to enable electrification. My name is Marion Santini. I work for the Regulatory Assistance Project, RAP. We are a global independent NGO, and our aim is to advance policy innovation and thought leadership in the energy community. Today, we will be talking about smart charging for electric vehicles. And I have asked my colleague Julia Hildemeyer to join us today. Julia is an expert on transport electrification at RAP. Hi, Julia. And, Julia, you've done a lot of work on smart charging. So before we actually introduce our speakers today, could you tell us why you think it's an important topic and why we should care about it?
Thanks, Mario. So I think to start us off, smart charging isn't really some geek feature on electric vehicles. It's really a key condition to get the transition to clean energy and clean transportation right. And why is that? Because as the market for electric vehicles is growing, especially electric vehicle fleets are growing, more electricity demand is being put on our power grids. And that demand needs to be managed in order to keep cost in check, but also, of course, to maximize benefits for users and the system. And the key recipe to ensure this is to put smart charging in place. And at RAP, we define smart charging as charging electric vehicles when prices for electricity and networks are lowest. It can be automated if needed. And of course, it shouldn't compromise the user's needs. So for example, schedules of logistics fleets. And that type of price-based smart charging can come in addition to what we define as load management, which is basically on-site optimization. For example, balancing charging of a fleet of electric trucks at the depot. With price-based smart charging, electric trucks can save significantly on their energy cost. In an earlier study, as a first indication, we found that a 10 electric truck fleet at a depot in Germany, based on a real use case, can save 10 to 15% of energy cost. But of course, these savings really depend on where the depot is located, the overall electricity consumption, the activity on site, the tariffs that they are subscribed to, etc. All of these factors we'll discuss today. And who should care about smart fleet electrification? Really, it's, of course, the fleet managers, the EV owners, or the depot owners, because of the savings they can make on energy, especially on grid cost, but also the grid operators, those that operate the power networks, because smart charging is a golden opportunity to learn what's going on distribution grids, to advance digitalization, to optimize capacity use, but also to increase throughput to the grids. And last but really not least, of course, everyone should care, everyone who pays an electricity bill, because costs and savings that we can make from smart charging are being socialized. So I'm looking forward to discuss all of these aspects more in today's session.
Thanks a lot for this introduction, a very complete picture. And before we move to our speakers who have a lot to share about these topics, I have to let you know that the session today is being recorded. Participants can put their questions into the Q&A box at the bottom of the page, and we will get back to them after the two presentations. So don't hesitate to put your questions in there. We will get back to them. We might group them, we might process them, but they're not forgotten. So now let's start. We are very happy to welcome today Hussein Basma and Markus Döhn, and thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. So I will start with Hussein. So you are a senior researcher at the International Council on Clean Transportation, ICCT. You are part of the Heavy Duty Vehicles Program. Could you tell us a few words about yourself and about your organization, ICCT?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thank you very much, Mario, for this introduction and for having me today at this great webinar. ICCT is a nonprofit independent research institution with a mission to support governments decarbonizing their transportation sectors. We have a global footprint, basically operating in every single major market. And our European office is based in Berlin, where I work from. And we cover most of the transportation modes, road transport, aviation, marine, and also fuels. But we focus mostly in this webinar, I guess, on road transportation.
Thanks a lot for the introduction. Now, sorry, I'm moving to Markus. So, Markus, you are a senior expert for electromobility at the DHL Group. Could you tell us what it means?
Yes, thank you, Marion, and hi, everybody in the audience. I'm Markus Döhn, working in DHL Corporate Development. DHL is a global logistics provider with an ambition to switch from fossil combustion engines to electric propelling systems in our fleets. So we do have a global fleet of more than 100,000 vehicles, and we have a huge track record in vans, and we are about to start the same journey in heavy-duty trucks, where we see similar but also different challenges. And this is what this short presentation and this entire webinar today will be about. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for the introductions. And let me remind all participants that they can put their questions into the Q&A. We'll get back to these questions at the end of the two presentations. So I'd like to start with Hussein. So I've asked you to tell us about where you see the opportunities with smart charging based on a study you've been working on together with RAP. Hussein, the floor is yours.
Sure, yeah, thank you again. Let me share my slide deck. Let's see. And let's go into presentation mode.
Perfect.
I think it works now. Okay,
Yes.
great. All right, so yeah, as you mentioned, Mayo, it's going to be a presentation about a recent study that ICCT and RAP conducted regarding the potential or the value of EV smart charging in the EU. And as mentioned in the introduction by Yulia, actually, so the main motivation behind conducting such a study and behind looking at the aspects of EV smart charging is the growing sales and shares of electric cars and also electric trucks and buses globally and specifically in the EU. Over the past couple of years, we have seen like I would say close to an exponential growth in the sales of electric vehicles, reaching several, I would say, millions today in the EU in terms of stocks. But not only for cars, we also see that for trucks. We have seen several thousand electric trucks hitting the European roads over the past couple of years, sending a very important signal to all the stakeholders involved in this ecosystem of EV charging that we should expect a significantly high power demand resulting from the charging of passenger cars and also electric trucks. And again, given the state of the local power grids in so many countries, we believe it makes a lot of sense to try to optimize the integration of this EV charging into the existing grid. And that's why we decided to conduct this global EV smart charging project, both from RAP and ICT's perspectives. And whenever we talk about smart charging, in order for things to be more concrete and I would say to make more sense to the audience, we really need to focus on some very specific locations, taking into account the geography-specific state of the grid, the power demand from the different economic sectors, and also the EV fleets available or expected in those geographies. And that's why we conducted this study in 4 regions globally, focusing on Europe. When I say Europe, it's really a very specific region. It's the department of Essonne, south of Paris in France, That was our European case study, but we have also done similar studies in India, in the city of Delhi, in China, the province of Zhejiang, and also in the United States, in Colorado. But for today, we're going to focus mainly on the European part, which is the city of Paris, or the Essonne department within the city of Paris. Before I introduce some of the main study inputs and use cases, I want to just give a brief introduction about the global methodology we implemented for this project. So definitely when we talk about EV smart charging, we should first talk about what is the expected EV fleet in this location. And to do that, we were able to quantify the electric vehicle stocks in the department of Essonne in the city of Paris, talking about the expected number of passenger cars and electric trucks and electric vans with all their different variations and different classes and segments. Next step was to be able to quantify the charging infrastructure needs for those EVs. So how many chargers do we need? What is the total power demand of the charging stations? What is the charging load, which is key in order to be able to quantify the potential or the value of EV smart charging. And once we have done that, we move to identify locations along in that specific geography where charging could take place. So which public highway charging stations, which residential areas, which warehouses or commercial hubs and depots will probably be electrified depending on the EV fleet activity. And then we deploy smart charging techniques, which is basically shifting the load in a way it responds to a smart, dynamic pricing electricity pricing tariff, reflecting the existing state of the grid in this very specific geography. And finally, we'll quantify several metrics such as avoided emissions, avoided investment cost, or in many cases, the reduced charging cost for the EV user. So as for our specific case study in Europe, so as I mentioned, this is the Essonne department south of Paris. It's a mix of urban, semi-urban, and rural sub-areas within this department. We have a lot of residential areas, commercial hubs, and also a lot of workplaces, which makes it a representative area to consider in terms of the an average European geography, considering so many different potential EV users in this case. So when we talk about the different types of electric vehicles that we would expect or that we already have in this specific department, it is essential to differentiate between those different types of fleets based on so many factors. For example, when we talk about electric cars or electric passenger cars, we know that some consumers would prefer to charge at home, would have the availability to charge at home. Others would use workplace charging. Others would rely more on public fast charging, for example, or highway ultra fast chargers. And for trucks, it's also the same. We identify depots as potential locations for charging, big warehouses and commercial hubs, and also public charging across highways. So it truly depends on the behavior, on the charging behavior of different users, and that's why we decided to work with all these different 8 EV fleets, so we can have a comprehensive understanding of the charging, the benefits of smart charging, depending on the type of EV fleet and their respective charging patterns. So as I mentioned, one extremely important point when it comes to the EV smart charging is to be able to build the load curve that we're going to optimize any way to minimize system costs or maximize system benefits. And to do that, we relied on our partners, Artelis, relied on data regarding EV fleet arrival and departure curves in the Essonne department in order to conduct this optimization of the EV charging load, and making use of the existing dynamic electricity pricing in Essonne. And the last puzzle in the modeling aspect is the grid modeling. Again, our partners, Artelis, they developed a detailed grid model in the Department of Ehsan, taking into account the existing grid load and also the projected grid load in the future regarding the department-specific economic development and planned investments. So all that to jump into the key findings of our analysis. So smart EV charging in this specific study showed that we can reduce the peak load in Ehsan's grid by up to 6%. Or maybe if we put it differently, so if EVs are charged in an unmanaged way, the peak load will increase by more than 30%, by 33% in Ehsan by 2040 relative to 2024. However, if the EV load is managed, so if we charge those EVs smartly, the load would only increase by 25%, or the equivalent of a 6% reduction in this peak load. So what does this mean to the investment or the expected grid reinforcement needs in the Department of Ehsan? So this can be translated into 23% less total kilometers of line reinforcements in the department, more like medium voltage line reinforcement. And in terms of the number of substations that would have needed reinforcement, this needs 37% less transformers would be subject to reinforcement if we charge smartly. If we try to monetize those findings, this would be the equivalent of savings in the range of 2 million euros per year, saving in the range of close to 0.7 millions per year between 2024 and 2040. One quick point to also highlight how things would actually work in practice. So this is a typical load curve in a residential area. So on the left-hand side, we have the unmanaged charging scenario, where we can see we observe peaks exceeding 8 megawatt in this case. But under the managed charging scenario, you can see that this red portion, which is residential home charging, can be significantly shifted until after midnight, thus reducing the charging peak below 8 megawatt in this case. The same logic can be applied to workplace charging, where we can avoid this midday peak or let's say the early morning peak, because usually workers plug in whenever they arrive. So that could be avoided as well if we stretch that out over the entire working day. And the same logic also applies for depots, because usually trucks also plug in whenever they arrive at the end of the day, 6 p.m., 7 p.m. after their end of their duty cycle. But if that could be stretched all the way throughout their overnight idling period from 6 p.m. until 6 a.m. the next morning, then this could also significantly reduce the peak for depots. So to sum things up, our findings really restate the kind of the obvious, which is using EV flexibility reduces peak significantly. It could allow for network savings in terms of reinforcement cost, and also like the total reinforcement needs in terms of the medium voltage lines and also the transformers. But again, a key ingredient to really grasp all those benefits of EV smart charging is to be able to introduce volumetric time of use network fees that would actually reflect the grid state in a given area. I'm going to stop here and hopefully get some exciting questions from our audience.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. This is really good to see, a real area with real numbers, looking at fleets. So I find this particularly interesting, and I think we will get back to this question of, what policies are needed to make that happen, actually. So let's park that for the time being. And thanks a lot. And now I have checked the questions. So there's a couple of questions on data sources and where to find the most accurate data. So perhaps I will let Hussein and Julia go back to the questions there on the chat and share the best sources. And I will keep the other questions for after the second presentation. So now, please continue popping in your questions into the question box. And I'm going to now turn to Markus. Now, Markus, you have a hands-on knowledge about what fleet managers can gain from smart charging. Can you tell us about your experience at DHL on this topic?
Yes, love to. Thank you very much. So the most difficult part now for me is that I make it work sharing and confirm it is on.
So it's on. I can see your comments on the side.
So that's exactly what I didn't want. Sorry. I can try.
It's okay.
Better now?
Yes, perfect. I can see your slide and only your slide.
So, apologies for the hiccup.
No problem.
So I mean, this picture is most of you are about to go on summer holidays, so this is just to put you in a good mood for the next 10 minutes. Maybe as a look back in time, this is not about energy management. This is about where we are and glimpse back from history. If we, with the way we look at challenges today, would assess the likelihood of vehicles to be spread around, then they wouldn't have been in a good position. Because if we look at a Model T, what it is, and we see the network, the safety, the service, which has been or is an issue as of today, we saw that reliability was an issue. Fuel was only available at pharmacies, that the tires were prone to defect thanks to the gravel roads. So just looking back, we saw a lot of challenges, but none of these challenges held the vehicle up from this big global success. And if we look at the electrification of heavy-duty trucks on a global scale, we simply observe that there's a lot of challenges to be bridged. And instead of tackling all of them at once, might be good and we do this in this exercise in this webinar today, is to look at particular ones and see how we can solve these bits and pieces, because it would be a jigsaw in the end, and we can only solve it one by one. And what I'd like to do is to focus on the opportunities we see, especially in the smart charging segment. Coming from a DHL perspective, as I mentioned in the intro already, we look at a big fleet of about 125,000 vans that are operated under control, most of them owned by DHL, and also another equivalent of vehicles that is trucks, most of them running with subcontractors, and only a small portion of them running with DHL and by DHL itself. So, but the difference here is that vans, integrating an electric van into a grid, is a completely different story compared to a truck. And this is because simply one, the amount of energy a van is charging, but also that a van has the entire night for charging. A truck only a very limited period of time, because the utilization of a truck is different from a van. So this is what makes it a big difference. But with the experience we've made with vans, we are really, really confident that we would also do this trucks. If I move one further, so what makes smart charging work is an energy management. This is what makes it work. And this energy management system is not only the consumers you see at a depot, it is also the, as of today, extended PV systems which generate the energy at your site, which is the opportunity to purchase your energy from PPAs, from power purchase agreements. This is the opportunity to upgrade your site with a battery storage and battery management system. And it also is the opportunity to be flexible on your grid expansion, not only by hardware, but there is ambitions within the EU that you could extend your grid time-wise, and not only for the entire time, but only by the time you would need it. So going one further, and to make it more concrete, as I mentioned, when we look into the energy consumption of DHL as a group, we see that we have an increase by real estate and events, which is the red bar you see on the left of the slide. But what you also see is the yellow one, and this is the one we should take more attention on, because this is what electric trucks would mean for our total energy consumption. It is one, the amount of energy that would be added to our consumption, but it is also the peak power that would be needed, because trucks usually operate at our depots at night and would have a peak or create a peak in the hours in the early afternoon between 4 and 6 and at midnight. And so the question is, and I'm moving one further, if we look at one specific type of buildings we have, this is the parcel hub. So a parcel hub is where parcels are sorted and prepared for line haul. Usually in a country, you operate a number of 40, like we have in Germany, parcel hubs where shipments are distributed overnight, and the next morning then parcels are sent to the satellite depots, and from the satellite depots they go into delivery. So 38 of these depots we operate in our network, 25,000 square meters of space with an average of 80 trucks arriving at night. And if we look at these, so the typical times when trucks are arriving, and you see this in this image, and I start with the left of the charging scenario, is from 1 to 5. And why is that? Because usually you try to send trucks to line haul the latest possible from the parcel hub they are leaving, but you need to arrive there before 5 in the morning to get parcels sorted and be ready to be delivered the same day. If they would arrive later than 5, say 6 or 7, you would lose one time in delivery, and that's not what you want. So that's why we generate a peak. Now the question is, can I move this peak around? Not very much, because then you would lose the ability to deliver the same day. So that's why we are relatively limited here to optimize or to shave the peak in time. But what we could do is, first, we installed a smart charging where we could then influence the sorters which are running in the depot might not work the same time we have the most trucks arriving. So there is a certain flexibility. But still, 8 trucks would make the depot power peak being exceeded, and 8 trucks, and I'm referring back to the number of trucks we expect in our depots, 80 would only make up 10% of our fleet, and this would be the maximum. So, which means, I admit, not every truck arriving would need to charge, but we see, if we see the range of a truck, that at least 30 to 40% we would need a top up of their charging. This is not a solution we could go for. So what do we need? We need other solutions. We need more flexibility in it. And one of those flexibilities, and I'm referring back to the slide with the energy management, is which tools are given in a smart charging or energy management scenario, would be the option of battery storage, or take it one step further, the swapping of batteries, something that is really that is existing in China and is executed in China already, where we don't have the standards in Europe, and I see the pros and cons to it already. But if we look at the big challenge we see, but also at the opportunities we see from it, I guess that battery swapping is a solution we are really looking into, because it would help us a lot, especially with the smart charging and the balancing of the grid. So moving one slide further, and this is already the last in a short line of slides, is that we as a group, when we look at the electrification opportunities around the globe, so we've seen the example from France, and when we are talking about these parcel hubs, we are in Germany or usually in the Western or the Northern Hemisphere, that we see that most of it is about the legislation that's been laid out, about the ecosystems we have for car, and that we now have a specific focus on the grids and the grid capabilities that has been established over the last 12 months, that it's all about, or most about, the grids and its abilities. If we look to China, where we do have a very sophisticated legislation, where we have incentives on a tax scheme, so incentives for cars are drawing back, but taxation, tax reliefs are still remaining. And we have a incredibly high pace in grid extensions. We see how quick it could be, and all kind of solutions we are talking seen in place. But on the other hand, and this is what we shall not forget here, is that we also have regions like Asia without China, Southern Africa, or also South America, where usually the electrification ambition already stops at the point that there is no 24/7 electricity availability, and that we need some power generators. We're looking into options like hydrogen to generate power on site to be able to have a reliable system or resistance system of vehicles, even for small vehicles. So what I'd like to repeat what I'm saying before, that is governmental subsidies and governmental schemes and legislation we see in major markets are, from my perspective, already going in the right direction, but we lack a bit of the impatience to tackle all problems at once instead of going one by one, and maybe at this point fully enable the opportunity smart charging. Would give us, we in DHL believe that green trucking is the solution, that zero emission trucking will be a solution, and we will succeed on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Markus. That was super interesting and also super hands-on. I really like the fact that you're comparing these different regions. I think we're gonna get back to the policy aspect of that in a minute. So it was really good to also get your assessment about the different schemes in place and how much they help the current rollout of electric vehicles in the fleet. So now, before we move to the Q&A session, I'd like to invite our participants to register to the Electrification Academy. We have a mailing list you can subscribe to, and my colleague is going to share it in the chat. So please register and join us for more exciting content. So now, I think, Julia, you have a question for both speakers. So before I go to the questions from the audience, I will give you the floor.
Thank you, and thanks both for your great presentations. Yes, I have a sort of opening question that, it's a generic one to help us get into the discussion to both of you. What do you think governments in Europe, but also across the world, can do immediately to help fleets do smart charging or to promote smart charging?
Yeah, I can go first. So yeah, I think Julia already mentioned maybe one very important one in the beginning and also like in the final slide of my presentation. The key element here would be to enable smart charging by introducing the dynamic time of use electricity prices. That's definitely the starting point. Those prices should be able to reflect the grid conditions, so providing consumers with the incentives needed to actually practice smart charging using those tariffs differential between, let's say, the day or the night, or even something significantly more dynamic at an hourly basis. So that's the number one enabling factor to do that. More from the other policy measures side, I would say mandating that all newly built chargers in the EU, let's say specifically as we're talking about the EU today, mainly all newly built chargers to be smart charging capable. And I think we do have some language about that in some European regulations and directives, like the Renewable Energy Directive. I think the AFIR also has some language about it, which will be reviewed by the end of 2026. So that's an opportunity to even strengthen the role of smart charging in the ag here as well. Subsidies also to home charger owners. Usually smart charging incurs slightly extra investment in terms of the hardware needed to maintain that. So that could also be helpful to incentivize some of that additional investment. And since we're talking about fleets, one very, I would say, interesting argument that usually always overlooked is public procurement. So we know big cities, like, for example, the main capitals in the EU, they do have a lot of fleets, a lot of public transit buses, vocational vehicles that do municipal duties during the day. And a lot of those are becoming EVs. So they can lead as examples. They can set a good example by implementing smart charging techniques along their own publicly owned depots. And we could definitely learn a lot from that, from such practices. Maybe I can stop here.
I think I all agree to Hussein has already greatly explained. And what we experience is simply that we need a good legislation that is might be not too complicated but which is reliable. And we see some regions in the world where we do not know what's coming the next day. We've gone through this period in the EU, but I think we do have a good legislation, especially on the truck OEM side, where we know where we're going, where we know the targets, we know the ambitions, we know an incentive scheme. So we used to have one, but we also know how it's calculated, and the fleet schemes are calculated. So what I experience is this: we've run through a process where we came to it, and what now is I see is a necessity is the mitigation of the risk, because somebody needs to take it. We have some upfront investments, and if governmental incentives can help here, I'm very much in a position to see that the time for incentive is not over yet, so that we can still claim it in a way that the THG quota in Germany, the HBEs in the Netherlands is one very effective mechanism, but also public procurement, as Hussein lately worked out, would be something. So I simply call to be brave and to be strict, and we go into the right direction and mitigate risk. Especially this has been taken by small companies that owned usually 10 or less trucks, and to burden all the cost on them is not a fair equation.
Thanks a lot for these answers. I have been screening the chat, and there's been a lot of interesting questions. And I see the speakers have already answered to some of them. So please continue popping your questions into the chat, and we will answer them either live or on the chat itself. Now I see some questions about the studies, and whether, there's data that is either covers more sectors that only the transport sector, or data which, would regard other regions. And there's also some questions about grid connections, which I think we identify as the main challenge right now when it comes to electrifications of different parts of our energy system. So I'd like to perhaps ask a question to Hussein first, and while we're getting more questions coming in the chat. So the first question I have for you would be, you presented results from Essonne in France, which is representative of a typical European region, as far as I understand. I looked it up in the map, and it's true. It's a good mix of cities, landscapes. Countryside. So it's quite interesting in terms of setup. And you mentioned in your presentation that you did similar studies in India, China, and the US. And I was wondering whether the results were similar in terms of savings you could get on the peak, and also whether, what would be the factors that would actually influence the savings you would see on the peak.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Marion. Yeah, basically, in all these four regions, I would say as a global conclusion is that the benefits of EV smart charging are considerable, are significant. Nonetheless, the order of magnitude of the savings and the peak load reduction or the monetized, let's say, system savings would definitely vary from one region to the other. Maybe to briefly touch upon those regions that we have studied, one very interesting region was India. We focused on, well, mainly on a corridor connecting Delhi to Jaipur, so like two very big industrial areas in India. We focused mainly on trucks, as this is a very truck traffic intense highway. And what's also interesting about this region is that it has a lot of solar power generation capabilities. So we basically try to understand how we can couple the EV smart charging or optimize the EV smart charging for trucks in this case with the solar power generation in real time during the day, and taking into account the specific conditions of that region. We also realized that we could save significant amount of CO2 and also system investments. I think we quantified something, and checking my notes here, close to $100 million in terms of system savings from what we define as solar truck charging across this corridor, which is a sizable portion of the total system assets or cost in India. In China, we also did a similar study in the province of Zhejiang, and one interesting metric to highlight the benefits of smart charging was that we were able to, or smart charging is capable of reducing the coal power capacity in that province by close to 20%. So that's 20% less coal, just because we're charging those EVs smartly during the day, using also the available renewables generation in that region. Same in Colorado. Colorado is a very progressive state in the US, known for its solar power generation and very ambitious renewables goals and EV deployment goals. Again, we quantified some significant savings, both at the transmission and distribution system levels in the state and also at the power generation level. Basically, we quantified something close to $900 million in terms of system savings, which would be close to 3% of the total system value in Colorado by 2040, if I'm not mistaken. So just to say that a lot of savings, that's the main message. It differs from one region to the other, but the punchline is EV smart charging is really a go-to solution, a no-brainer for the mass and wide deployment of EVs in different regions.
Thanks for that. Perhaps, Julia, I know you've also recently looked into the situation in different parts of the world. Is there something you want to add on the, the differences between regions?
I think Hussein summarized it very well. Our global our learning was really that, of course, the way smart charging happens, or smart EV charging can be optimized, really needs to be tailored to the local conditions. So, of course, where there's solar capacity available, let's tailor smart charging solutions to capture that. Where we have lots of coal in the mix, let's try to use smart charging as a tool to absorb renewables. Where in Colorado, where the state already has renewable objectives, and we can generate lots of savings from smart charging. We actually found that these savings were enough to equip the entire state's households with L2 chargers. Now, I'm not saying that that has to be done, but it just gives us a really good sense of investing into smart charging, investing into energy efficiency pays off, because we can help reduce consumption overall. I think that was a really important learning. And the global, let's say, two lessons from this, apart from, of course, region differences, is really that for getting smart charging to work for fleets, we need to get the right pricing in place. Without any price incentives, consumers just won't have any incentive to save money, of course. And we need to plan the charging infrastructure and the distribution grids accordingly, and make the right sized investments, so that we have enough capacity to serve the future load, but we don't overinvest either, because that creates cost in the system. But we use tools such as smart charging to help fleets use the capacity in an optimal way.
I guess, I mean, as I understand, there is also, like, as you mentioned, that these huge investments we need to make into the grids, and we want to make it happen fast. We want to be quick, and we also want to deliver them where they are urgently needed. And I hear in this room, but also from other stakeholders, that grid connection is a major constraint to electrification. And I'd like to turn to Markus and check, you talked about depot where, you presented in your presentation. And I was wondering whether the grid connection there was upgraded for the electrification to happen.
Mhm. Yes, a very good question, because this is something that's really time consuming to really assess your grid connect, and then to see the abilities to upgrade it, because this is not only the hardware that's existing, but also really time-wise availability of energy. So the 2.2 megawatt was what is taken as an assumption here, was the already upgraded grid capacity. So this is actually, it's less than 1 megawatts. And potentially we would have 2.2 in very, very few occasions. It's 5 megawatts, but we have seen it only in one example out of this 40. And maybe to put this in perspective, and not only saying we're not good at upgrade, an airport would have be about 10 megawatts. And the logistic depot, half of this capacity of an airport, is already a sizable number. But to answer your question, so this is already a state where we would potentially be in 5 years' time. But that's not bad, because the vehicles are not arriving before then. Exactly as what Julia said, to have the energy in place when we need it, and not today when we don't.
Mm. Thanks. That's super interesting. I'm also wondering the benefits and the assessment of the benefits is also very much linked to the local situation. And there was a question on the chat which was saying, is there a study which would basically incorporate, the potential of flexibility in the transport sector, the potential of using heat pumps more flexibly? And I mean, that's a question for you. I'm not aware of such study. And is it because the benefits are so local that it's easy to come up with like big numbers about the flexibility potential, and it's also like kind of possible to make these bottom-up studies, but can we reconcile both to have a like complete picture of the energy system? Have you seen that in other studies? That's a question we got from the chat.
Yeah, maybe I can jump in here. We'll definitely, once we start talking about very wide geographic coverage and very wide economic coverage, like all the economic sectors, we need to start involving the right stakeholders here, and those are definitely the local TSOs and DSOs who probably have all the data needed to conduct such a comprehensive assessment of the benefits of smart charging and the expected EV load, or the other loads from the other sectors. I am not aware of a economy-wide comprehensive study in the EU that looks into the benefits of smart charging in such a quantified way, but I am aware of a bunch of ongoing projects actually looking at the expected load growth in the EU from all the economic sectors, which also takes into account the potential of smart charging or load shifting for EVs, for heat pumps, for other economic sectors that can have some flexibility. And this is an effort led by ENTSO-E, so the European Association of Transmission System Operators, as part of their national development plans. So I would say no published studies in a similar fashion to what we have done, but definitely the topic is becoming more important for TSOs, for transmission system operators, and also they are taking it into account into their own load development planning.
Thanks a lot. Does anyone want to comment on that? I have a totally unrelated question. Sorry, Julia, do you want to?
Yes, I can't leave the topic without commenting and just adding that this is one of the sort of hot topics, you know, being discussed at the moment, and I'm actually glad that many stakeholders in the transport sector, you know, are becoming more and more aware of what's needed to successfully integrate electrified road transport into power grids, and I think the main grids are the main bottleneck at the moment to ramp up electrification. And what we're seeing, what we're learning is that it's absolutely crucial to improve the way that grids are developed and grid capacity is planned for and projected. And it starts with really sharing the right information at the right time with the right people, in the sense that we're having, you know, very, very you know, large and comprehensive exercises of projecting load forecast in the network development, but at the same time, not all of the plans currently take into account, for example, projected charging demand from all segments in transport, especially heavy duty segments, and that's really where, you know, this is the segment that is going to grow and is going to put a challenge on the grid. And it's not just taking into account detailed forecast of how they're going to charge. It's also about assumptions of when they're going to charge during the day, because that makes all the difference to the projected peak you're going to have in a system. And that exercise needs to be done locally by all grid operators. And I think we can really improve transparency here, also transparency requirements on grid operators. We have had a large power sector market reform last year on European level, which has sharpened some of these requirements on grid operators to do this planning. And it's also key for the transport sector to provide the right data here, so we share this information. And that's a really important point. Another piece to this, and I'll be short on this, is that what we need is European-wide, upgraded, accessible, and updated hosting capacity maps, which means that we all have much more visibility on what's going on the distribution grids. So basically, actors from all sectors can see where's the capacity, where can we build, for example, charging infrastructure, how is it being used? So the market, the charging infrastructure can be built, but also the market for smart charging services that helps to use this charging infrastructure optimally can grow. And we need this transparency to be available to help smart charging, especially smart charging of fleets, because they're, of course, using a variety of different charging infrastructure across Europe.
Thanks. Perhaps, I mean, turning to Hussein and Markus, Julia just mentioned the diversity of charging needs, and Hussein, you also showed, you know, the different types of fleets and the different needs they have. Markus, you also mentioned that by, you know, showing there are two types of vehicles at DHL, you know, that have probably a different profile in terms of their charging needs. So in which use case do you see the most potential for achieving grid savings from smart charging? So if you would be a government, what would you address first? Households, small vehicles, large trucks? What should we be busy with?
I think Markus will say depots, definitely. Go ahead, Markus, if you can.
So in the future, I think that vehicles and depots cannot be separated, because a huge bulk of energy would be spread and would be provided via a depot. And maybe there's one slight addition to what's been said before. If none of this study is existing on the grids, we'd be really happy to participate in it, because this is all the information we are really keen on to know. Because, I mean, what struggles us the most is to do the prediction for the next day. We do have fleets. We operate the fleets on a schedule. We see some deviations in it, but we have also PV systems producing energy. What we can't predict is when is a cloud casting over and taking away 30% of the production. And this has main impact on your energy production, thus has main impact on your energy production, what actually the energy supply needed at a depot. So this is an impact. And then Hussein, I'm exactly what you're saying at the depot, because at the place where I have the vehicles is a depot, where I have the solar panels is a depot, and I see the deviation also from the supply side by the vehicles, but also from the generation by the PV system. And this is what I need to balance, and what makes it so difficult at this point within a balance group. And last comment here, I know all of you are knowing or not knowing it are part of a balance group or operate your own, and not meeting a prediction for the next day is something really, really expensive.
Thanks for sharing. Hussein, do you want to add something?
Yeah, first, fully agree with what Markus mentioned. I think by definition, if we're looking at this from savings perspective, which applications makes the most sense to prioritize in terms of smart charging, definitely depots would be one of the most important ones, because by definition, the more an EV and truck or a car spend in a certain location, the more flexible it is, the more responsive it is to pricing signals, and thus we can exercise smart charging even more aggressively in this case. So depots definitely is the one of the priority areas to focus on. Also, like in our analysis, we have seen that residential home charging could be, I mean, given the volumes of passenger EVs, that's definitely where most of the benefits can be grasped from enabling the smart charging of residential EVs. Workplace charging is also an application where we could get a lot of benefits, especially that many corporates today already offer on-site charging for their employees. So that could also be again, an important venue. Trucks traveling along highways, again, by definition, those trucks need to charge very quickly within 30 minutes to 1 hour. So they might not be that flexible, but it doesn't mean we cannot really make use of those of any flexibility resource here. Because also, as Markus mentioned, on-site storage could also play a big role, not only for depots, but also for those high megawatt power charging stations along highways. Yeah, so all in all, I would say pretty much every single EV user is really capable of smartly charging their vehicles. Some probably more than others, but in the end, yeah, we would love to see smart charging capable chargers pretty much for all users.
Thanks a lot. I mean, this is fascinating, and I'm so sorry we're already coming to the end of our time together. I'd like to really warmly thank you for the presentations. And before we wrap up, I'd like to give the floor to Julia. I mean, Julia, you are the specialist in RAP on this topic, and I'd like to check with you. You know, what did you learn from today's session? What should we take away?
Thank you, Marion. A quick wrap up from my side. I think it's become clear that we need smart charging to be default to accelerate electrification of fleets in all segments. The two essential ingredients that I've heard today are planning and pricing. Planning of the grids, right side investments, you know, making capacity much more available in a transparent way. Reforming grid connections. We didn't go into detail, but you know, let's work with what we already have. Flex connection agreements, shared connections. There's plenty of ways. There's in fact a big toolbox about what we can do to sort of you know, reform the overcome first come first served approach. And there's a great RAP paper on this that I can post in the chat in a second. The sort of second ingredient is really pricing. Cost reflective pricing of power networks is absolutely essential to send the right signal to consumers. And we're lucky that the European Commission has just issued guidance on this, recognizing how important this issue is to be solved on European level. Of course, it's energy regulators and national competence to in the end do so, but it's a really important sign that this will be one of the big issues to solve for electric transport, but also other sectors electrifying. So with that, I just want to point out to more of policy opportunities that I think we will have on European level to keep the discussion going with upcoming policies or such as the grids package, an electrification action plan. Of course, on the transport side, we're going to see charging infrastructure law reviewed, clean corporate fleets. There's a couple of really interesting policy opportunities that are upcoming. So I think we'll keep the discussion going for sure. Yes, and we're really on a good way to build this European-wide policy framework to support smart charging of fleets that we will need to help them accelerate in a cost-efficient manner and with benefits for themselves, the users, the grids, but also, of course, the environment. And I just want to hand over to Marion, but not before I say a big thank you to the speakers for their excellent presentations and for all the good questions. Thank you.
Thanks a lot to the speakers, and thanks also to the participants for their great questions. So don't forget to register to the Electrification Academy. If you have problems doing it, just send us an email and we'll help you through that. And have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.